Okay, so picture this. It's payday. Your phone buzzes. You get that little notification. Money's in the account. And for like maybe 30 seconds, you feel amazing. You feel free. You start doing the math in your head, right? You're thinking, okay, rent's covered. I'll put a little away. Maybe treat myself this weekend. I deserve it. I worked hard this month. And then, somehow, 2 weeks later, you're not exactly sure what happened, but you're sitting there staring at your bank account thinking, where did it go? Like, not in a dramatic, catastrophic way. You're not broke. You didn't do anything obviously stupid. You didn't blow it all at a casino. It just evaporated, quietly. The way money does when you don't have a plan for it. I think about this a lot, honestly. My name is Sam, and I've spent the better part of the last several years completely obsessed with how people handle money. Not just the math of it, but the behavior of it. The weird psychological loops we get into, the habits that feel harmless but quietly drain us, the small decisions we make in the 30 minutes after we get paid that can either set us up or slowly sink us. I've talked to people who make $100,000 a year and are stressed out of their minds, and I've talked to people making a fraction of that who somehow feel calm and in control. And the difference almost never comes down to income. It comes down to what they do on payday. So that's what this is about. Not some complicated financial strategy. Not a 12-step program. Just a payday routine. A specific set of things you do every single time money hits your account. That, if you actually stick to it, will quietly, slowly, but genuinely change your financial life. Some of this will be stuff you've heard before, but some of it, I think, is going to hit differently. Because we're not just going to talk about what to do. We're going to talk about why the way you currently treat payday might actually be working against you in ways you can't fully see right now. Sound good? Okay, let's get into it. Why payday is actually the most dangerous day of the month. I want to start with something that sounds a little counterintuitive, and that is this. Payday, the day you feel the richest, is actually the day you're most financially vulnerable. Think about it. When your account is low, you're careful. You check before you buy. You hesitate. You make deliberate choices. But the moment money comes in, your brain does this thing where it inflates your sense of abundance. Psychologists call it something like a wealth effect. Your perception of how rich you are temporarily exceeds your actual financial reality. You feel flush. You feel like you can afford things you technically can't, or at least shouldn't, prioritize right now. I remember talking to a friend, I won't use her name, but she made decent money, genuinely. And she was always confused about why she couldn't save. She'd get paid and feel like she had so much. Then she'd eat out a few times because, she earned it. She'd grab a few things online because there was a sale. She'd top up her coffee subscription. Nothing major. But by the time rent came out and bills cleared, she was right back to scraping through the last week of the month. The issue wasn't her spending. The issue was that she had no system that activated before the spending did. Here's a simple way to think about it. Imagine your paycheck is water being poured into a bucket. If the bucket has holes in it, and most of our financial lives have holes, honestly, the water will just find those holes and drain out. It doesn't matter how much water you pour in, the bucket still empties. A payday routine is basically your way of patching those holes before the water goes in, or at minimum, deliberately deciding where you want the water to go before it just goes wherever gravity takes it. So, step one of any payday routine isn't actually a financial action. It's a mental one. It's pausing, genuinely pausing, maybe even for just 5 minutes, and acknowledging that the money that just hit your account is not free money. It's already spoken for in some way. And your job right now is to make conscious decisions about where it goes before unconscious behavior does it for you. The 24-hour rule, and why most people skip it. Right, so once you've got that mental pause in place, the next thing I want to talk about is something I call the 24-hour rule. And it's one of the simplest, most underrated things you can actually do on payday. The rule is this. Before you do anything with your money, before you go shopping, before you transfer things around, before you pay anything that isn't an automatic bill, you wait 24 hours. Now, I know that sounds almost too simple, but bear with me. The reason this works is because payday comes with a lot of emotional energy attached to it. Relief, excitement, that sense of abundance I mentioned earlier. And emotional energy makes for terrible financial decisions. You know this. You've probably experienced the version of this where you bought something the day you got paid and felt a little weird about it a week later. Not regret exactly, just a mild sense of, I probably didn't need that. The 24-hour rule creates a little gap between impulse and action. It gives your brain time to shift from, I have money, let's celebrate, to, I have money, let's be thoughtful. And in that gap, a lot of bad spending decisions quietly disappear on their own. You wake up the next morning and you're like, actually, I don't really want that thing, or at least not right now. There's also a practical reason to wait. When you get paid, it can take some time for everything to settle. Pending transactions clear, automatic bills come out, your actual available balance becomes clearer. Waiting a day before making active financial decisions means you're working with more accurate numbers. Now, does this mean you freeze and do absolutely nothing? No. There are things you absolutely should do immediately on payday. We'll get to those. But anything that requires a choice, anything that's not pre-scheduled and automatic, ideally gets a little breathing room first. Pay yourself first, but actually do it, don't just nod along. Okay, pay yourself first. You've heard this. I know you've heard this. But I want to talk about why most people who've heard it still aren't doing it, and why the version of it you might be practicing might actually not be the real thing. The standard version of this advice goes, when you get paid, put money into savings before you do anything else. And yes, that is the idea. But here's where it breaks down for most people. They hear, pay yourself first, they transfer $50 into savings, and then they spend the rest however they spend it. And then, the next month, when things are tight, they pull that $50 back out. Sound familiar? The real version of paying yourself first has two parts that both have to be in place. The first part is automation. The money has to move automatically, as in, without you touching it, without a decision being made in the moment. Whether that's a scheduled transfer to a savings account, a contribution to a retirement account, an investment that drafts automatically, the key is that it happens without your conscious participation. Because here's the brutal truth. If you rely on willpower to save, you will eventually not save. Willpower is a finite resource. Automation is not. The second part, and this is where most people miss it, is that the amount has to be genuinely meaningful. Not aspirational to the point of being unsustainable, but not so small that it doesn't actually build anything. I've talked to people who are paying themselves first by saving 1% of their income, and they wonder why after 2 years they still have basically nothing saved. There's no magic number, but the general guideline most financial thinkers land on is somewhere between 10 and 20% of your take-home pay. If that feels impossible right now, start at 5. Start at 3. But actually start, and then actually increase it every few months. Here's the metaphor I like for this. Paying yourself first is like putting on your oxygen mask before helping others on a plane. It sounds selfish. In practice, it's the only way you can help anyone else, including your future self. The bills first architecture, building your financial foundation. So you've paused. You've let the emotional energy settle. You've automated your savings. Now we get to the part that most people either do chaotically or not at all. Building what I'd call your bills first architecture. This is basically just the practice of knowing exactly what your fixed obligations are, making sure they're covered, and only then thinking about everything else. But doing this systematically on every payday, not scrambling every month when due dates sneak up on you. Here's what this looks like in practice. You have a list. A simple one, could be in your phone, could be in a spreadsheet, could be on a scrap of paper, of every single recurring obligation you have. Rent or mortgage, utilities, internet, phone, insurance, subscriptions, loan payments. Every single thing that you must pay and when it's due. On payday, you cross-reference this list. You confirm that everything scheduled to come out before your next payday is covered by your current balance. Not your current balance plus what you're hoping to save, your actual, honest balance. I know this sounds almost painfully basic, but you'd be surprised how many people don't have this list. They kind of know their bills exist, they vaguely remember when they're due, and they mostly figure it out. That mostly is the problem. Mostly leads to the occasional overdraft. Mostly leads to the panic of realizing rent is in 3 days and your account is lower than you thought. Mostly is a low-grade financial stress that sits in the background of your life and just doesn't go away. The bill's first architecture is boring. It is genuinely, deeply boring. But boring financial infrastructure is what creates exciting financial freedom later on. One thing worth mentioning here, and this is something I think is underrated, is to actually review your recurring subscriptions as part of this. Not every month necessarily, but every 2 or 3 paychecks. I have yet to talk to someone who does this exercise and doesn't find at least 1 or 2 things they're paying for that they forgot about, don't use, or could replace with something cheaper. Subscriptions are sneaky. They're designed to be easy to forget because if you forget them, they keep charging you. A little awareness goes a long way. The guilt-free fund. Because you actually do deserve nice things. All right. I want to take a slight turn here because I think there's something important missing from a lot of payday routine advice, and that's permission. Permission to spend. Permission to enjoy your money. Because if your payday routine is just a long list of restrictions, save this, pay that, don't touch this, you are going to rebel against it. Human beings do not sustain pure austerity. It doesn't work. You'll white-knuckle it for a couple of months, and then blow it all on a weekend because you've been depriving yourself. This is why one of the most important parts of a good payday routine is deliberately, intentionally allocating money for guilt-free spending. Some people call this a fun fund, a play money account, a personal spending allowance. Whatever you call it, the idea is the same. A specific amount of money that, once it's in that category, you can spend on literally anything you want without guilt, without analysis, without justification to anyone, including yourself. The key word there is specific amount, not just whatever's left over, because what's left over tends to fluctuate and then get absorbed by other things. An actual predetermined number. Could be $50 a month, could be $200. Depends entirely on your income and your other priorities, but it's a real number that you decide on during your payday routine, not after everything else has happened. Why does this work? Because it creates a psychological container for your wants. Instead of wants leaking into every area of your financial life, which is what happens when there's no container, they have a designated space. And interestingly, when people actually do this, they often find they spend less on random impulse stuff, not more, because the impulses get absorbed by the guilt-free fund, and everything outside it starts to feel cleaner and more intentional. The debt conversation you need to have with yourself. This one's a little uncomfortable, so I'll try to handle it gently. If you have debt, and a lot of people do, there's no shame in that. Your payday routine needs to include a specific, intentional moment where you look at that debt and make a conscious choice about it. Not a panicked look, not an avoidance look, an honest, clear-eyed look. Here's what I mean. One of the quietest ways that debt keeps people stuck is the minimum payment mentality. You see the minimum due, you pay the minimum, you move on. You feel like you handled it. And technically you did handle it. You didn't default. But minimum payments on high-interest debt are basically a slow bleed. You're paying mostly interest, barely touching the principal, and the debt kind of just stays there. For years, collecting interest. The thing I want you to do on payday is ask yourself, after savings are automated, after bills are covered, after your guilt-free fund is set, is there anything I can throw at debt above the minimum this month? Even a small amount extra on the principal makes a meaningful difference over time because of how compound interest works in reverse when you're paying debt down. I'm not going to prescribe a specific debt payoff strategy here because there are a few, and which one works best depends on your situation. Some people swear by the avalanche method, highest interest rate first, because it's mathematically optimal. Others prefer the snowball method, smallest balance first, because the psychological wins of paying off small accounts keep them motivated. Honestly, the best method is the one you actually stick to. But the habit I want you to build is this. On payday, debt doesn't get ignored. It gets acknowledged. You look at it, you make a decision. Even if the decision is, I can only do minimum this month, and that's okay. And you move on consciously rather than anxiously. Emergency fund first, investing second. The order matters more than you think. Okay, quick but important detour. There's a conversation that comes up a lot in personal finance circles about whether you should be investing or building an emergency fund first, and I want to give you my honest take on this. If you do not have an emergency fund, meaning money set aside specifically for unexpected expenses, not your savings, not your investment account, but actual liquid cash in an account you can access quickly, then every time something unexpected happens, you are going to raid your other financial goals to cover it. Your car breaks down? Investment account. Medical expense? Savings wiped. Unexpected job gap? Everything scrambled. The emergency fund is not a luxury. It's the foundation that makes everything else stable. Without it, your financial plan is built on sand. The general recommendation that most financial educators land on is 3 to 6 months of essential living expenses. That sounds like a lot, and it is, but you don't build it all at once. You build it on payday, a little bit at a time, as a separate automatic transfer until you get there. Once that's funded, then yes, absolutely, investing becomes a priority. Compound growth over time is genuinely one of the most powerful forces in personal finance, and the sooner you start, the better. But trying to invest aggressively before you have an emergency cushion is a bit like trying to run before you can walk. You'll probably fall, and it'll be embarrassing, and you'll have to start over. So, on your payday routine, this is the question to ask. Is my emergency fund fully funded? If yes, redirect that contribution toward investing. If no, keep building it. The 5-minute payday check-in, the habit that holds everything together. All right, we've covered a lot of ground. Savings automation, bills architecture, guilt-free spending, debt awareness, emergency funds. And I want to be honest with you. None of these things work if they're just concepts you sort of agree with and then forget about by the time next payday rolls around. The thing that actually holds a payday routine together is a simple, consistent habit, the 5-minute payday check-in. This is exactly what it sounds like. Every single time money hits your account, whether that's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whenever, you sit down for 5 minutes, you open your banking app or your spreadsheet or whatever system you use, and you run through your payday checklist. What does that checklist look like? Something like this. First, confirm what actually came in, your exact take-home after taxes and any deductions. Second, confirm that your automated savings transfer has happened or is scheduled. Third, cross-reference your bills list against your available balance. Fourth, allocate your guilt-free fund. Fifth, note any debt payments above the minimum if possible. Sixth, a quick visual scan of recent transactions to catch anything unexpected. That's it. 5 minutes, maybe 10 if you're being thorough. But this check-in is the ritual that keeps you connected to your money instead of floating along hoping for the best. I think one of the biggest problems people have with money is that they treat it like a weather system, something that happens to them, something they observe from a distance. The 5-minute check-in is your way of saying, no, I'm not a passive observer. I'm in the driver's seat. I know what's coming in, I know what's going out, and I'm making deliberate choices about the gap between the two. It doesn't have to be perfect. Your numbers won't always work out exactly the way you want. Some months will be tighter than others. That's fine. The point isn't perfection, it's engagement. Staying engaged with your money is one of the most powerful things you can do, and it takes less time than most people think. The bigger picture, what you're actually building. I want to zoom out for a second because I think sometimes when we talk about payday routines, it can feel very tactical and granular, and you can lose sight of what any of this is actually for. Here's what you're building. When you have a payday routine, when money comes in and you have a system that immediately, automatically, thoughtfully directs it, you're doing the few things simultaneously that individually seem small but compound over time into something genuinely significant. You're building financial security, which is the most underrated form of freedom that exists. When you have an emergency fund, when your bills are covered, when you have savings growing in the background, you are less scared. And being less scared about money changes your life in ways that go way beyond money. You take better career risks. You stay in less crappy situations because you're not financially trapped in them. You sleep better. You argue less. The spillover effects of financial stability into the rest of your life are enormous and deeply personal. You're also building a habit identity. Every time you run your payday routine, you're not just moving money around, you're reinforcing a self-concept. You're telling yourself, at a very fundamental level, I am someone who takes care of my finances. And that identity, once it's established, has this quiet momentum to it. It starts to feel weird not to do it. Good habits, just like bad ones, become self-reinforcing over time. And honestly, and this might sound a little cheesy, but I mean it sincerely, you're building something for your future self. That version of you who doesn't have to stress about retirement, who has options, who can help people they love, who can take a trip or leave a job or weather a crisis without it becoming a catastrophe. Every payday routine, every small, consistent decision, is a little gift you're giving to that person. They're going to be grateful. Common mistakes and how to avoid them. Before we wrap up, I want to quickly touch on some of the most common ways people fall off a payday routine. Not to be discouraging, but because being aware of the pitfalls is genuinely half the battle. The first mistake is making the routine too complicated. If your payday system requires 45 minutes and a color-coded spreadsheet, you're not going to maintain it. Simplicity scales. Complexity collapses. Start with something you can actually do every time, and add complexity later as the habit solidifies. The second mistake is treating it like a punishment. If your relationship with your payday routine feels like a monthly accounting of everything you did wrong, you will dread it and eventually avoid it. The routine should feel neutral to positive, like checking in with a project you're managing, not like attending a hearing. The third mistake, and this one's subtle, is setting savings and investment goals based on what you think you should be doing rather than what you actually can do right now. If you set a goal that's too aggressive and you can't hit it, you'll feel like a failure and abandon the whole system. Set goals that are real, goals you can actually meet with your current income and obligations, then raise them over time. The fourth mistake is ignoring irregular income. If you're self-employed, freelance, or have variable income, a payday routine still applies. You just have to adapt it. Instead of thinking in terms of pay periods, think in terms of percentages. Every time money comes in, X% goes to taxes, set aside, not spent. Y% to savings, Z% to operating expenses, and so on. The principle is the same. The application is just more fluid. And the fifth mistake, maybe the most human one, is expecting perfection and quitting when things aren't perfect. Some months will be hard. Some months you'll skip the check-in or blow the guilt-free budget or have an unexpected expense that messes everything up. That's not failure, that's life. The routine is something you return to, not something you maintain without a single stumble forever. So let's bring this home. We've talked about a lot today. The weird psychology of payday and why it makes you vulnerable, the importance of pausing before spending, automating your savings so you remove the decision from the equation, building a bills-first architecture so you're never scrambling, giving yourself permission to enjoy your money through a guilt-free fund, staying honest about debt, building your emergency fund before investing, and holding it all together with a simple 5-minute check-in every single payday. None of this is magic. None of it is some secret that the wealthy are keeping from you. It's just a system. A boring, consistent, doable system that, if you actually use it, will quietly, steadily change your financial life. Here's the thing I want to leave you with. Most people spend more mental energy worrying about money than they spend managing it, and those are not the same thing. Worry is passive and exhausting, and doesn't change anything. Management is active and grounding and moves things forward. The payday routine is how you swap one for the other. You don't need to be good at math. You don't need to be disciplined in some exceptional way. You just need a system and the willingness to show up for it, payday after payday, imperfectly but consistently. Your future self, the one who has a cushion, who has options, who isn't running on financial anxiety, that version of you isn't some distant dream. They're the natural result of a bunch of ordinary paydays handled a little better than the last ones. You've got this. Now go set up your routine.